reporter Nick Farabaugh, and I'm John Luciew. And for the first time in the podcast history, we're streaming live on YouTube in addition to the post that we put up on YouTube, the recorded post. And we will be open for chat questions and comments for Nick as the show goes on. So if you have those, send them in, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. But I want to start off the show, Nick. I really sensed something this week. It was a momentous 7 days since the last podcast we did together. We have George Pickens being shown the door. I mean, we know he's super talented but temperamental. And the Steelers decided to move on, and Dallas was the willing trade partner. And then toward the end of the week, we had that gathering of all the rookies and undrafted free agents, and a tone set there. It was a collection of captains, high character guys, high floor guys, football guys, Steelers DNA guys. And I'm just wondering if there was a larger message about the reset and the rebuilding process, a different direction that we kind of hinted at last week, but with the strong message of shipping Pickens off, even though we really don't have it's another year where we don't have a really good plan B in the receivers room under Omar Khan. And then just some of the high character comments that we saw coming out of rookie minicamp, and you were there up close and personal. So am I delusional, or is there sort of a sense that we're building back better this time around?
I mean, they're trying to. I think there's no doubt about it. I think they're trying to build it a little differently this time around. I think they're trying to kind of look back at what happened the last time they did this, which, I mean, listen, they really haven't had to retool the team, quarterback and all, I mean, since the 2000s before Big Ben. So you're really looking back to the early 2000s, and then you're kind of mapping out what you need nowadays in the NFL to win. And I think that's the big thing for the Steelers. So listen, they're not just looking anymore at how do we win a Super Bowl this year, because it's not going to be tenable year over year. Obviously, you want to put together the best team possible to win a Super Bowl, but it is not always tenable to do that. You have to be honest with yourself as a franchise at times to actually look and say, hey, listen, there is a line this year where we don't feel like we can get over the hump. And maybe the Steelers do feel like they can. I don't think that they are showcasing that through their actions, though. So building back is, how do we build that structure for the next generation? And I think that's what the Steelers did really well in the early 2000s. Is you just look at some of their hits, man. I mean, they're drafting that early 2000s to the late 90s. I mean, Faneca was in there. Plexico Burris was in there. You had Hines Ward, Antoine Randall, Willie Parker was an undrafted free agent. Like, you just look at it, and then obviously the biggest one being Ben in 2004. They just hit home run, home run, home run, home run, and that was deep down in the draft. And what the Steelers did really well at the early part of the 2010s as well to build up the killer bees was they drafted ahead of the need. Le'Veon Bell kind of came in and stabilized things. But you had the young money crew, but AB and Emmanuel Sanders and Mike Wallace, you poured a lot of draft capital into that. You got really good receivers out of that room. But the biggest one that I can think of is Cam Hayward, learning from Brett Kiesel, learning from James Harrison. The Steelers did the same thing at edge rusher Jason Worlds. Now, they couldn't have really predicted what happened with Jason Worlds. He decided 4 or 5 years into his career he was going to become a Jehovah's Witness. You can't really kind of, prepare for that. So that's something to look at. But Worlds was a really good player before he retired. But they did this consistently throughout that. And they tried to do it a corner. They missed, right? They tried it with Keenan Lewis and Cortez Allen, and it didn't work. But in late 2010s, in the early 2020s, it wasn't just about building sustainability. It was kind of these short-sighted moves. And you got to have some long-sightedness even when you're in a win-now franchise window. And so the Steelers are kind of showcasing that, building trenches first, right? O-line, D-line, trying to get a star receiver in DK Metcalf. They're building it out differently this year, and they're going through the steps. So there's a lot of things to it. Some of that's that captain, the captainships we've talked about, building a new kind of leadership core. They need one on offense. Obviously, they don't really have one on offense, to be quite honest with you. Defense, they're just trying to kind of get the next generation there. Cam Hayward's not getting any younger. Minka Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, they're not getting any younger. So they're trying to get the next generation in there. So it's all about building for the future in some respects, while trying to still keep the specter of the win now mode. But the Steelers are trying to do this future thing. As we've talked about this offseason, though, it's been a little in, out, half in, half out type of thing with the Steelers this offseason. But there's clearly a future plan there that they would like to enact.
No, that was a great trip down memory lane, and I have a lot of fond memories of those names you mentioned. And you mentioned obviously the coup de grace was Ben in '04, but one of my personal favorites was the following year when they added Heath Miller in '05, and then had that great Ben to Heath relationship for the next decade. That was fun to watch. And the other thing you mentioned too, the anticipatory needs, the smarter strategic building for the future, but also, with the departure of Pickens, he was clearly, and we knew this going into the draft when the Steelers pick him, and he was a problem child, where this past draft really are guys of character and substance and captains. And I just wanted to, say, I do think there was a marker laid down in shipping off Pickens, and the problems that he created, which apparently were far deeper than we knew, initially. According to one of your colleagues, Mark Caboli, the right players were fed up with George Pickens in the Steelers locker room. Jerry Dulac says there was a litany of violations from Pickens in terms of the Steelers rules. We know he was late on Christmas Day, for example. But the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones and his kids, they look at Pickens and they see the complete opposite. They see the missing link there that they really got a number one receiver for their number two. You know what I mean? So it's like they're and they certainly sweeten the pot trade wise. And then there's this for even from Cam Hayward, who's a veteran who hears the clock ticking, and he's now preaching patience in wake of the Pickens departure. Quote, "I'm sure guys have talked about it, but I think the main thing is, and this is a PSA for all Steelers fans, don't panic, stay patient, we'll get to work. I think sometimes we can jump off the ship and think the ship is sinking. We got work to do, and whoever won in the offseason isn't going to win in the regular season. It's not going to win the Super Bowl," unquote. So who won this trade with George Pickens? Do we know yet? Did the Steelers get a good deal, with the draft picks they got? Did Dallas get some guy who's going to light it up in fantasy and, make a lot of Steeler fans jealous? I mean, how do you see this playing out from here?
I mean, I've always thought this is good value for him. I mean, listen, John, they didn't have a single day 2 pick offered to them during the NFL draft. We talked about this last week a little bit, how teams had called teams had called them, but the offers were like 4th round pick, 5th round pick. Dallas was the only team that came up to a day 2 pick, and it was after the draft, obviously. It was after other options that they had fell through. I think that was the interesting part, is they kind of rebounded to George Pickens. They were talking, about Rashad Bateman potentially with the Ravens. They were looking at other free agency targets, and it kind of just ended up being Pickens being the one that was most open, and they had to give up a 3rd round pick. The Steelers got them to give that up. That was good GMing, in my opinion. It's a good process to get there. So, listen, man, I think it became clear, and you listed it, John, that they were just tired of George Pickens. Like, I think it's not complicated. People ask, why'd they do the trade? If you didn't get the right value, or you didn't get a 2nd round pick, why trade him? That's why you're tired of him. You decided it was time to move on from him. Clearly they did. They had conversations about it. I think Omar Khan said honest, serious conversations when he spoke to us last Friday. He said they had honest, serious conversations about it, but this wasn't some lush market. There weren't multiple teams offering day 2 picks for George Pickens. The only reason George Pickens finally got traded now instead of the NFL draft or even earlier than that is because they finally got their asking price, which was at least a 3rd-round pick. I also think the Steelers wanted a 2026 3rd-round pick. Why? Quarterback. It's all going back to quarterback, guys. And I will say this. I think people look at the comp picks in the additional 3rd they now have from this Pickens trade and say, well, they're doing that to have the ammo to trade up. Well, you look at what they're going to have to give up to trade up, John. They're going to give up their 2027 first round pick more than likely. So it's more likely than not going to be, their 2 firsts and maybe 2 day 2 picks. So I guess it's a little bit of ammo. But actually what I think they're doing here is they're gathering enough picks, a collection of picks, to fill out the roster around the quarterback. That's kind of what they're doing here. They have 12 picks right now scheduled for the 2026 NFL draft. They're probably going to make that many picks. They might even make more than that. It wouldn't be surprising if they dash around the board after trading up. They trade back. They do all these different things. We see teams do this all the time, especially really good general managers. And so acquiring draft capital is more than just about kind of going and looking at a value chart for a quarterback, for example. It's all about what needs do they have. And if you look at the Steelers' needs next year, it is a lot of needs. They need a lot. So they needed a lot of picks. And so that's part of it. I think they got good value here, though. The league did not value George Pickens like the public valued George Pickens. I mean, he's a mercurial player, and that is exactly what the league viewed him as. Now, George has a chance here to kind of shed that reputation and completely renew himself. And so far, I think he's doing a good job of that. I think he did a really good job in his press conference, kind of shrugging things off. He's not holding in or anything like that. So he's kind of trying to shed this reputation before he hits free agency next year. But I mean, I can go through the examples right now. Let's go down a trip memory lane. Let's do this, John, with George Pickens. So when he's coming out of Georgia, there were obviously character red flags about him being kind of a mercurial player that even Georgia said, okay, this guy is a lot to deal with at times. He was suspended in 2019 by Kirby Smart for being undisciplined and quote unquote selfish with his actions. That was something that popped up in the draft process. We saw teams take him off their board completely for these concerns. The Steelers said, okay, we're good with this. Mike Tomlin said, in fact, in October, the year after they drafted him, he's a competitor. We're fine with it. That wasn't an issue. He actually said he took umbrage to it. So something to note. Then in December of that year, George kind of had that crash out on the sideline. Deontay Johnson calmed them down in Atlanta. But it was just kind of crashing out on the sideline. Like, you can deal with it. It's just emotions, right? This is a guy that is a highly emotional player. And I think Pickens is a highly emotional player and competitive. I think his work ethic's there. But here's kind of where things went off the rails. I think in 2023, we started to see this a little bit. The biggest one to me that kind of pointed out was Indianapolis against the Colts. Jaylen Warren is running and trying to get touchdown. All Pickens has to do is block the corner, and he doesn't block him, says he's trying to not get hurt. And that's just not what happens in football. That doesn't sit well in a locker room when you don't go full effort for your guys. If you remember, Jaylen Warren literally came out and said, if I were in that position for him, I would have blocked for him. Now, I don't think Warren and Pickens ever had some type of falling out or some beef or anything. But that definitely stands the time. And then the Steelers went into the offseason and decided, listen, Deontay Johnson, who had been also kind of a malcontent behind the scenes, someone that wasn't happy with his usage, his quarterback situation. We saw that obviously bear itself out this year with Deontay Johnson across multiple teams. They said, okay, we're going to trade him. So they traded him, and in doing so, they traded Pickens' best friend on the team and also someone they deemed to not have a great influence on on Pickens. That's something that I think was widely reported by Jerry Dulac, Mark Caboli, and I believe Ian Rappaport even reported that at one point. So that's something to note. So they said, okay, maybe George is going to mature and can be depended upon. So we're going to make him the X receiver. We're going to make him the undisputed number one. And we got him as the top dog in Arthur Smith's offense. And that's what he was this year. And so how did he respond to that? Against the Cowboys, he wears that eye black that is always effing open. And then when they lose that game, he yanks Jordan Lewis down by his face mask at the end of the game. Okay, that's not great. That's not what you want to see, right? Then in Cleveland on Thursday Night Football, I remember talking about this, John. Hail Mary, he gets into a scuffle with Greg Newsome, takes himself out of the play into the back of the end zone. It's a mess. There's jabs back and forth being thrown on social media and through press conferences. Pickens and Newsome are going at each other 2 weeks later. Mike Tomlin kind of brushes it off, covers for him. So 10 days later, they go to Cincinnati. They win this game 44-38, but Pickens gets called for 2 unsportsmanlike conducts, one for mimicking firing a gun, another for dropping the ball on a Bengals defender, takes the Steelers out of touchdowns. I believe both of them went to field goals, I believe. So both of them hurt the Steelers. So I can't remember actually if that's true, but I do know that they got backed up 15 yards, and Mike Tomlin was asked about it. That is when the "he's got to grow up, man" comment came out. And then the week after that, he's calmer against the Browns. Could have obviously gone completely off the rails there. He gets hurt, hamstring injury. He's coming back for that Christmas game, and then he's 40 minutes late even after the inactives are revealed. He's late to the Christmas game. They kind of work him in with the hamstring injury, but he was supposed to test the hamstring out pregame. He plays anyways. Doesn't have a great game, of course. And then we go to Cincinnati a few weeks later, and the Steelers lose that last game, and he has to be pulled back by Pat Frymuth because he's jawing with fans and fighting with and is kind of verbally fighting with them in the crowd. And so all of this comes together, John, to create a picture of a guy that is very talented, very competitive, but a mercurial player that cannot be trusted upon to be your team's wide receiver one. When you were asking the Steelers to give him 5 years of near $30 million per year, probably is what he would want, you have to be trusted upon. And the Steelers said, we can't do it. So they went out and got DK Metcalf. And that's what kind of happened here. The reason George Pickens isn't here anymore is because they couldn't depend on him to be the number one receiver. If they could depend on him, all the money that went to DK Metcalf would have been gone to George Pickens. That's 100% true. George Pickens would be in line to get his extension done this offseason. He would be getting his extension done this offseason. Sure, you might have a hold-in and whatever else, but if he had shown he could be dependent upon, the Steelers would have gone out and said, okay, George, we're going to pay you this. The Steelers couldn't trust George Pickens to be their wide receiver one. That's ultimately why the league was lower on him, why the Steelers decided he had to be traded, and why we are now where we are. And so just wanted to kind of lay out those events for you guys. Uber talented football player, unbelievable competitive spirit. The work ethic is there. But when you do this time and time again, and you showcase to a team that you can't be trusted upon with the professionalism aspect of this game and basic things on and off the field that teams require from their number one guy that they want, that is exactly what ends up happening. So the Steelers sold on that. They weren't going to give him an extension. They got a third-round pick offer. They said, okay, we're going to do it. Now, the biggest criticism you can have for the Steelers to me is, well, if you were going to trade him, why didn't you either, one, sign a guy, or two, draft a receiver? That is the criticism Omar Khan should have, but there is still time. Let's see if he maybe goes out and adds somebody here to this room. If he does, then you can kind of take that part of the analysis in to full context. But right now, you also do have to look at it and say, why did they not add somebody else in addition there? So when they traded Pickens, it would be good. But we will kind of see how that all goes about. The Steelers clearly, I think, like Calvin Austin a lot. I think they're intrigued by Roman Wilson. And so I think they're going to give them at least OTAs and minicamp to showcase what they can do, see where the Steelers feel about it. And then I think they could make a move potentially into training camp here. Whether that's a trade or a signing, we'll see.
No, that is definitely a great recap of the short and bittersweet, or mostly bitter, maybe a little bit sweet, life of George Pickens in Pittsburgh in a Steelers uniform. And I guess a lot of it goes back to, there's an old saying, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. And that's why I think there's a larger turning point with this draft, where I just think the Steelers are sick of the problem children. And if there are the red flags, they're going to go with the high character, high floor guys rather than the flashy guys who have a ton of potential, but maybe, have some quirkiness or mercurial, whatever adjective you want to use to say kind of a problem child. And maybe there was a thought that, okay, Mike Tomlin was so good with players, he could handle some of these guys. But that's off the table. And it's funny because, one of your colleagues in the radio business out there, Andrew Filipponi, turned it all around on Tomlin. He doesn't like Tomlin, and he said this about the whole scenario with Pickens. Tomlin lets George Pickens act like a jackass, then gets credit for getting rid of him. Give me a break. I mean, I guess that's one way of looking at it, because I do think there was a thought that they thought Tomlin could have these players come in and he would bring them into the fold, and he had that perfect touch with as a player's coach. But I just think they're tired of it, and I think that was also reflected in that draft, and having those rookies come in and some of the high character comments. Everybody was gushing in Pittsburgh, hearing Will Howard talk and Derek Harmon and all those guys. I just think it contrasted very nicely on the same week when Pickens was sent packing. I just think that was a good bookend. And I know you did a separate podcast, a solo podcast, sort of reviewing all the rookies and how they're going to fit in. But one guy that you and I haven't really talked about that caught my eye when I was reading some of your summaries of that was the tight end fullback hybrid, DJ Thomas Jones, and how this dude, who has like a great nickname, what is it, the All Violence, first team All Violence or something like that. I mean, just might be really fun to watch in this Arthur Smith offense. Why don't you give us a little taste of him and what you like about him?
DJ Thomas Jones is so much fun. First team All Violence is pretty cool. Basically the story behind that is, he got first team All Honorable Mention in the Sun Belt and the teams. And, he does a lot of dirty work, right? He blocks, he does a lot of special teams work. He just does a lot of things that's not glamorous. And so, when he blocks, man, he craters sometimes the side of the line. Like, he can really get after it on the inline part of the line of scrimmage, and he really can block his behind off. I think that's the big thing is you look at what he can do. This guy's a really good blocker. He was a former 4-star at Ole Miss. His teammates, because he was All Honorable Mention, feeling he should have been more, gave him a plaque that literally said first team All Violence. So he's now first team All Violence, DJ Thomas Jones. But we're talking about a guy that had tremendous sacrifice. I mean, with Ole Miss, he was there for 2 years, probably would have ended up playing a role there in the SEC. He had to go back home because his mother was dealing with health issues. And he kind of sacrificed all of that, went back home to Mobile, Alabama to play South Alabama. Really, really high character kid. And this is a guy that can play all over the offensive formation, John. He could play wing. He could play H-back. He could play inline tight end. He could play fullback. He can play in the offset eye. You could do a lot of different things with him. And there is a role for that on this football team, John. There is not a clear backup blocking tight end on the team. I think that's really the big thing here for him is Michael Pruitt is here no longer. Right now, who is the backup to Darnell Washington as the blocker? I think that's the big thing. If Washington gets hurt, who is it? And I think it's him. Like, I think that's the kind of credit to him where you would look at that. And he's a bigger guy. So, their fullback last year was Connor Hayward, who was kind of a tight end fullback. But he's only about 6 feet. He's about 6 feet, 240. DJ Thomas Jones is 6'2", 260. He's a big guy, but he moves well. He gets in and out of his breaks. He can run routes. I mean, you look at his athletic comparison, when you put it in, he tested like a really great athlete, by the way. 9.14 relative athletic score. That's out of 10. He's a really good athlete. When you put in his physical comparison, the best comparison that comes up at the fullback position, Kyle Juszczyk. I'm just saying. So he's got this kind of interesting body, this bigger guy. He's not Dan Kreider, right? Like Dan Kreider was a squatty guy. Rosie Nix, more of a squatty guy. This guy's big. He looks like a tight end, but he's a tight end fullback. So he's a really interesting player. There's just a lot of receivers in this tight end room. You know, the other undrafted guy, JJ Galbraith, is that way. Donald Parham, who was their big time, was their tight end signing, their first signing of the offseason this year, like 6'9". He's more of a receiver type. And so there's probably going to keep 4 tight ends. But if there's a guy that can be a tight end fullback hybrid that can block like this, DJ Thomas-Jones has a chance here to make the roster. And so I think his role here is really interesting. They gave him the most guaranteed money of any undrafted non-quarterback free agent they ever have in franchise history. So they like this guy a lot. I think he's an interesting player to watch. I think he has a chance here to make the roster. I don't think people are giving him enough due, but keep an eye on DJ Thomas-Jones. I am so excited to see when they go into team run in training camp what he can do. I'm just really excited to see that.
Well, we will be watching along with you. And of course, we know tomorrow evening, it's the big schedule announcement. We get the whole schedule for the Steelers and where they're going to be. We know that they're going to be in Ireland on September 28th. It's a 9:30 a.m. kickoff time for Pittsburgh. So you got to set your alarm. And it has led to, this time of year, right before it comes out, there's all these leaks. And I was perusing social media, and two comments really tickled my fancy, regarding the schedule. This one from Nick Nicastro, schedule leak. The Steelers will be playing on an AFC wildcard weekend on the road as an 8-point underdog. So book that. We'll see about that. But we know that that's been, one of their regular things, one and done on the road, big underdogs. We'll see if it happens again this year. And then there was this take, which I think is a little more serious in wake of, the announcement that they'll be in Ireland on September 28th. It says, watch the NFL give the Steelers an early bye and then screw them by putting their AFC North games late in the season. They never do the Steelers any favors. That's from Blitzberg on X. And I think they might have a little point knowing that Ireland game is early. Isn't that when they usually do a bye after you do travel like that? I mean, are we going to get stuck with an early bye and then all the big games late in the season?
I mean, I don't think so. I think they're going to flip the divisional series probably. Probably going to get more early. I wouldn't be surprised if they open up against a divisional opponent. We'll see. There's some rumors out there that it could be a divisional opponent. I've heard. I know there's been some speculation that it could be the Packers on Monday Night Football. I don't have confirmation on any of that right now. So whenever I do, I'll let you know. But I don't. But I do think, from what I had heard, at least the Steelers had kind of made an effort to push to have their divisional games spread out, right? Not 6 of the last 8 games. I think it's going to be more spread out this year. So expect to see that a little bit more spread out. Early bye, I mean, the Steelers can choose if they want that bye. So the NFL generally asks the Steelers or whoever team is kind of on an international trip, do you want this bye early? Do you want this bye later? Where do you kind of want to fit it in? So the Steelers, if they get that bye, are probably going to want that bye. At least they can kind of put it into the league and say, hey, we would like to have our bye week 8 instead of week 5, right? So you can definitely do that. So it's not completely locked in stone that they're going to have the bye week there. In fact, they may not. We will see. The Steelers, though, this year are going to be an interesting team on the schedule because they don't have a quarterback. But if they have Aaron Rodgers, they automatically become really ripe for primetime opponents, even if they're not good. I mean, the Jets weren't good last year and were in a ton of primetime games just because Aaron Rodgers, right? And so the Steelers are probably going to be the same way. I imagine they are going to book the schedule like Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that Green Bay game, even if it's not Monday Night Football in week 1, it's probably going to be Sunday Night Football in week 10 or something like that. It's probably going to be the whole reason it's not in Ireland. That was the original game that was going to be in Ireland. It was going to be Steelers-Packers, and then became clear Aaron Rodgers was a factor, and the Steelers said, whoa, we want to keep that game for ourselves. We want to take the proceeds at Acrisure, and so that's why that's not happening. And so the Steelers, I think, are going to have 4 or 5 primetime games, and that doesn't mean, they're going to have Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football. They're probably going to have 1 or 2 Sunday night games. I mean, I look for sure, and I think I thought of this immediately when I saw the opponents this year. They go to Detroit this year, at Detroit on Thanksgiving. Definitely, I think, would make a lot of sense for them. The NFL loves putting the Steelers in those blocks. They were on Christmas last year. They were on a standalone game on Saturday against the Ravens. They love to do it. So, I mean, you can imagine probably Steelers-Ravens somewhere in there is going to be on some standalone Saturday game late in the year, something like that. So they're going to probably be pretty primetime heavy. They've always been that standalone heavy. They'll probably play on, some holiday or something, even if it's not Thanksgiving, Black Friday or something, right? Like they'll play somewhere there. So Aaron Rodgers is going to affect that, but the NFL is probably going to do this like, hey, Aaron Rodgers is probably coming to the Steelers. So we're going to give them primetime games like that. And if he doesn't, we can always switch it anyway. So that's what I imagine is going to happen here. So we'll see. But as for divisional games, I expect those to be pretty spread out. In fact, there might even be more in the first half this year than there are in the back half. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. I will also say if you're doing kind of the deduction of when the Pirates are in town, generally the NFL doesn't schedule the Steelers and the Pirates on the same week in Pittsburgh. The Pirates are in town week 1, but they are not there Monday night. So Monday Night Football could be a consideration in week 1. Otherwise, if they're going to play on Sunday, they're probably going to be on the road. Ditto for week 3. The Pirates are there all weekend. Steelers are probably going to be on the road. So probably the most likely outcome, John, of what this will be if it's not Monday Night Football week 1 is on the road, home, on the road, Ireland. Then we'll see what happens after that. So Steelers are going to be traveling. If that plays out, John, the Steelers are going to be, I know the Ireland game is a home game, but the Steelers are going to be leaving Pittsburgh 3 out of their first 4 games.
Interesting setup. I'll tell you, as a season ticket holder, I like the fact that the Steelers want the Green Bay game at Acrisure. I'm definitely looking forward to that matchup. And if indeed they go to Detroit on Thanksgiving, I think that there's going to be a lot of people from Pittsburgh having Thanksgiving on the road in Detroit. I think there'll be a lot of Steeler fans at that affair in Detroit if that happens on Turkey Day. So that will be interesting, and we'll know everything tomorrow evening or maybe even earlier as these schedule leaks continue unabated. Finally, my last sort of thing that popped up on my radar, with rookie camps convening all over the league, there was sort of a mini debate on who got the best D lineman at the top of the draft. In Cleveland, apparently, many Browns fans are worried about the number 5 pick, Mason Graham. Apparently, he did not look good, lackluster performance, and even vomited on day 2 of minicamp. This, according to reporter Dov Kleiman. Meanwhile, in Miami, Dolphins rookie tackle Kenneth Grant looked like an absolute monster, all caps. And this reporter, John Frisella, is sticking to his evaluation that he is definitely better than his teammate from Michigan, that being Graham, who went to the Browns. And finally, of course, in Pittsburgh, ESPN's Seth Welder is predicting that it will be the Steelers' Derek Harmon who will take the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year award after a very successful rookie campaign in Pittsburgh. So any thoughts on that trio of talent, on the line for the defense?
Yeah, man, it's interesting. Listen, I thought these three guys were all close to each other throughout the process. I thought Mason Graham was a really good player. He was my top defensive tackle in the class. I love Derek Harmon, though. He was my second. But I mean, you can even throw Walter Nolan in there. Kenneth Grant, obviously, is a big dude. We talked about these guys throughout the process. I think Harmon winning Defensive Player Rookie of the Year is probably a little lofty. I mean, I kind of have a hard time seeing it not be Abdul Carter. We'll see, but I just know Abdul Carter is such a stud, and so it's a little tough for me to not envision that. But I love Derek Harmon, obviously, and what he brings to the table. Anyone that has concerns about a pick based on what they looked like in rookie minicamp, though, it's completely foolish. Guys, these guys are not even in pads. They are not in helmets. They are not in shells. They are in shorts and a t-shirt. All they are doing is literally doing technique-based drills. They're installing the basics of the basic playbook. They're going through walkthroughs. They're doing some mock 7-on-7s, but it's basically like it's not even full go 7-on-7s. Like there's nothing here. You're just looking at like baseline athletic traits. And if you saw Mason Graham play football at Michigan, or you saw him at the combine, or you saw him at Michigan's pro day, you would know, for example, he's a really good athlete. Like that's not an issue. And that's the big thing here is like there are things you can tell from guys. Now, if there's like worrying habits, potentially sure, but like I don't think there's any worry about that. Same thing with like someone saying, "Wow, that guy had an unbelievable rookie minicamp. He was elite at rookie minicamp." Again, they don't do anything really. Like they do basic individual drills. So you're just kind of looking for like baseline things. Like I was looking when I was talking about Caleb Johnson yesterday, I talked about how detail oriented he was because he's just asking really in-depth questions about pass pro. And when they go through the pass pro gauntlet, he's asking these questions. Like that's a really good sign to see. It doesn't mean anything really in the grand scheme of things. It just means he has really good habits that could see him grow a weakness into a strength much easier. You like to see those traits. But really, to be quite honest with you, rookie minicamp reports are crazy. So whatever you thought of Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, et cetera, before they were picked, I think you should still think the same way. At the very least, wait until we see them on a football field in pads. And even then, John, the mirage of training camp standouts that the Steelers have had. It's the same way across the league. Some of them translate it to be real. Some of them completely falter and don't even make a roster. And so let's wait, guys. Let's wait until these games matter, until we 100% say this guy is trending down or whatever, just based off 2 days where these guys are in shorts and their jerseys. Because that's all they were in across the league.
And that's why we have you, Nick, to put things in perspective, to temper the sensationalism of social media, and to all give us the realistic dose of football knowledge. And this episode was our first live on YouTube, but from now on, we are going to be going live every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. So hopefully we'll start building our live audience. And then, of course, the recorded version will be available all week long on YouTube as well. But, we definitely want to get more interaction live with fans who can put some comments and questions in the chat as we go live every Tuesday at 4. And this episode, even though it was unannounced, it was going to be live. We did get one comment, and I'm going to read it. It comes from Justin, although I think it might have been my wife writing in. I'm not sure. I'll have to check with her. But anyway, he says, Nick is one of the best doing this in Pittsburgh. Much respect, my friend. And John does a great job asking the questions fans want us to know. I appreciate it. So there you have it, Nick. Some more kudos to add to your extensive file of great comments that you get on all your work you do for Penn Live and then on social media. And we'll see everybody back here Tuesday, 4 o'clock. We're going to be going live from now on. So get those comments and questions into Nick, and we'll get his football knowledge there for you. Take care and go Steelers. Megan. Oh, she said it's stuck, so we still might be live here. We didn't stick the landing.
Behind the scenes,